I'm Madelyn Blair. On today's show, we'll be talking about journeying through life with David Petrucci, who journeys regularly through one of the most famous journeys in history, the Camino de Santiago. In Grounds for Thought, I'll be talking about the principles Leonardo da Vinci used in his own life journey that you too can use. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about unlocking the resilient leader in you. Before we begin, could I ask a favor? If you like the show and you like what we do and support us the free, simple way by hitting the subscribe button. Now, if you're watching through E26 TV, send me an email with a thumbs up icon. That's all you need to say. Either way, my commitment to you is that I will do everything in my power to make sure this show is better for you every single week. We'll listen to your feedback. We'll find the guest you want me to speak to, and we'll continue to do what we do. Thank you so much. Our careers and our lives as a whole are journeys. We make progress, we stumble, we pick ourselves up, and the cycle continues. Across cultures, long journeys, and even short walks in the park are part of restoring ourselves when we stumble. The path is also considered, and often considered, sacred, meaning simply something that is set apart. As I prepared for today's show, I was curious if there were other sacred networks walked by pilgrims other than the Camino de Santiago. And there is. But first, UNESCO World Heritage refers to cultural and natural sites of outstanding universal value that are recognized and protected by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. They are sites that are considered of importance to all of humanity and given special consideration for preservation. They must possess exceptional qualities that make them significant on a global scale. Some are man-made, others are natural. For example, the pyramids of Egypt and the Grand Canyon are both on UNESCO's list of such sites. But there are two that are networks of ancient pilgrimage routes, combining nature and man-made structures. One of them is called Camino de Santiago in Spain. The other is Kumano Kodo in Japan. The Kumano Kodo has been used for more than 1,000 years by emperors, aristocrats, commoners, and even samurai. The network of pilgrimage trails is 190 miles, about 370 kilometers, almost as far as Washington, D.C. is from New York City. It's a long way. The network consists of 5 interconnected routes. The purpose of walking the trail, and it is always walked, was for renewal, for worship, spiritual purification, and renewal. It includes 3 main shrines: Kumano Hongo Taishe, Kumano Nachi Taishe, and Kumano Hayatama Taishe. But there are many minor shrines as well. In addition to the shrines, the natural beauty is part of the attractiveness of the journey. In the Japanese culture, there is something called forest bathing. It's not sitting in a bathtub in the woods. but simply sitting quietly amongst the trees, observing the surroundings while breathing deeply. It is considered to help both adults and children to de-stress and boost health and well-being. I like to think of it as letting the forest wash you. Now, we need to turn to Camino de Santiago with my guest, David Petrucci. A mutual friend thought I would enjoy talking with David, and he was right. Let me bring him on so you can meet him too. Hello, David. Welcome to Unlocked.
Hello, Madelyn. It's great to be here.
Oh, great to have you. Now, David loves walking the Camino, and we'll just refer to it as the Camino. He has walked over 2,000 miles. Now, there's a whole long list, David, of Français de Norte on a lot of things. But I'm just going to leave it that you walked 2,000 miles. David's first career was in the food and entertainment industry, where he owned pizza shops and a dinner theater. Now, during his dinner theater career, he produced 75 Broadway comedies, mysteries, and musicals. His second career was in the financial services industry as a certified financial planner and advisor. And David has been retired for 12 years, but don't be dissuaded that he is retired by any definition. Today, he spends his time with grandchildren and serving his community through his membership in Rotary. He's completed 2 Boston marathons at ages 70 and 71, and he does yoga and meditation. I'm getting tired just listing these things, David. And he walks the Camino de Santiago over and over. So once again, welcome, David.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. All right. I just want to jump right in because you've had a long career being an entrepreneur, a financial planner. Today, you're retired, but still living a very active life. I think I can understand the move that led you from food and entertainment to financial planning. But I'm curious, what were some of the lessons you learned and maybe some of the stumbles you had in those endeavors?
Oh, wow. Many lessons. I was in business for 45 years all told. When I first started out in my career, I was reading a lot of books about business, being successful, etc., organization. And I happened to come across a book by Og Mandino called The Greatest Salesman in the World. You probably have heard of it. Absolutely fabulous book. And it's not so much about these XYZ selling techniques. It's more about creating a foundation for service. It's more about just having a blueprint for life, really. And two of the particular, there were 10 precepts in the book that when they tell the story, and it's a very interesting story with an interesting twist at the end. So I encourage people to pick it up and read it. But one is do it now. So I always have that in my head when I'm trying to do something or wanting to accomplish something. I think it's easy for us to not finish projects or to get distracted. And so I always try to remember to do it now. And the second one was persistence. I will be persistent until I succeed. And that was really important to me and really made a big impression on me. And especially during the first career, food and entertainment business, that was a very difficult career.
Yeah.
Financial services was challenging as well. It's all about getting up every day, having that resilience in your heart and mind, and just showing up and doing the best you can. So those are probably 2 of the top lessons, I think.
Outstanding. I can't resist. The idea of the dinner theater, I just find so terrifying. You not only have to serve food, you have to put on a production. What decided you to create a dinner theater?
Probably the best way to say this is I don't think we ever really decided to create a dinner theater. It just happened. I was 27 years old at the time, and it was more like the way I understood it was following the energy or just being in the moment and doing what was in front of you. So the backstory is We were in the pizza business. A building went up for sale, and it was a movie theater. And it was one of these old movie theaters, 700 seats, had a balcony. Originally, it was a vaudeville theater. And as it turns out, it was the largest vaudeville theater, or first vaudeville theater in the county. So my father had always wanted to open up an Italian buffet restaurant. And he wanted to buy this building. So we said, sure, let's buy it. So we bought it, and we built the dining room, built the kitchen. We had a buffet room. And those three rooms occupied the first part of the building. If you've ever been in an old movie theater building, or lucky enough to have been in a restored vaudeville theater, you know that they're deep and they go back. And so we opened up the restaurant. We were ready. We were in business serving customers, and we had this large auditorium sitting there, not knowing what to do with it. And so we had a family meeting, and my mother says, let's dinner theater. So we said, sure, let's start a dinner theater. At that time, dinner theaters actually were in vogue, and there was a lot of them in the country. There was especially a lot in the Baltimore, Washington market. There were like 15 at the time. And our background was, my father and I had been to one theatrical performance in our entire life, the same one. So that was our theater background. My mother had
blown away, David.
It was interesting, but we're like, oh, we could do it, no problem. We're good managers. We know how to do the food part of it. So when I talk about it being part of a flow of energy, literally 3 days later, someone knocks on our front door and says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about starting a dinner theater. I'll do the theatrical part of it, and you do the food part of it. So we said, sure, let's do it. So our first show, we did, 9 weeks, 2 shows a week, so 18 performances. And at the end of that, we said, we can make this work. So, of course, the next thing you do is you take 700 seats in a dinner theater or in a regular theater, and you take them out and get rid of them, and you terrace off the structure there so that you have tiered seating. And so we did that, and then we opened up our second production. And then by that time, we think we know everything there is to know about theater. So we decided we're going to start producing on our own, which was an interesting decision at the time. But in any event, we survived. And so we grew the business over 15 years. And at the end of it, we were serving 75,000 people a year. And it was just a fabulous journey. And like I said, I don't think we ever decided to do it. It just happened to us.
Yeah. But you know what I love about that story, David, is that it was a family activity.
Yeah.
So you went into it with real support around all of you.
Yeah.
Because you were supporting each other. Oh, yeah. Fabulous.
It was
75,000, huh?
75,000 people. Yeah. It was fun. It was challenging, educational, all the above.
All of the above. Ah, wow. Thank you for answering that question, because
Sure.
That one I just had to ask. When I work with executives and their staff, one of the major complaints is that there's no time for thinking. When I managed large units, this was something that was really on my mind, because we were doing intellectual work. So intellectual work, you better make sure that people have time to think. I wonder if you would talk about it from your perspective. And was this an issue? And if it was, how did you cope with it?
Looking back, I never took time to think. I was always just moving.
Yeah.
Moving. The first 10 years of any entrepreneur's life is trying to survive. And doing everything that you can to keep moving forward and improve and what have you. And in my mind, stopping was not a good idea, nor was it a reality or a possibility. So I just kept moving. After a few years that we were in business, we had the opportunity to take a course in meditation, which we did. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is I didn't adopt it and stay with it. So now, 50 years later, I practice and I understand the opportunity that I missed and wish I had made the time to do it, because it's an incredible tool. Being able to calm the mind and being able to be in the present moment and to not necessarily think, because in our culture, thinking really is just holding on to these thoughts that have been created from who knows where, that are constantly circling in the mind and don't really give you much insight. Meditation gives you insight into problem solving, into who you are, and into what you're really doing and why you're doing it, and what's important about it to you and to the customer, and all of the groups of people that are participating, all of the stockholders, vendors, employees, very important, customers, all the stakeholders. So I would say that it's critical to be successful in life, in business, in marriage, in family, and everything, to be able to take time to, I use the word meditation, there's lots of different flavors, but to calm the mind and to go into what's important and get in touch with that higher self, so to speak, and connect with that and understand. And a lot, I think spending a small amount of time on that has incredible benefits. Worth the time. Don't wait 50 years. Develop the practice. And I say this, and people are listening. I've talked with many people about this concept before, and I know generally it seems what happens. People hear you, they try it, and a week or two later they abandon it. I'm coming back to this. I'm going to strongly suggest stay with it, be persistent. Yeah. And make it happen for you, and you will never regret it, and it will definitely add to your life and all facets of your life.
My sense is that maybe part of why you do the Camino. The Camino is a long walk, and you're not necessarily with a lot of people. You might be with some people. What is the Camino? And should anyone decide to do this? Talk about that a bit, because I can see now a real link.
Sure. The Camino de Santiago in Spanish is translated to the Way of St. James. So I'll give you the background, give you some context. The Way of St. James. St. James the Apostle was sent to Spain, what is now Spain, to preach the word, and eventually was martyred, and his body was buried in Spain. It was discovered, and the bishop at the time built a chapel there. And this was in 850. So you're talking about over 1,000 years ago. And after a while, people started walking. The chapel grew into a church, grew into a cathedral, and pilgrims from all around Europe started walking to Santiago. So there are literally 10,000 miles of Camino, the way, leading to Santiago. So coming from Brussels, coming from France, Italy, all the countries in Europe walking to Santiago. And it's 1,000 years ago, there were as many as 1 million people making this pilgrimage. Wow. It's pretty fascinating. And at that time, so Rome, Jerusalem, and Santiago were the big three for that period of history. And so the Way of St. James, it's a pilgrimage. The most popular and best known route is called the Camino de Francis, which gets its name from the fact that there are 4 routes in France that all converge to St. Jean-Pied-de-Port in France. And then from there, pilgrims walk over the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain. And that's a 480-mile trek to Santiago. The Camino is many things to many people. People do it for many different reasons. I think the attraction to it is that it's peaceful. There's a lot of elements to it. There's the culture, the cuisine, the history, the camaraderie, communities. It's My wife and I walked into a small church once that had an altar that went back to, I think, 800. So it was a 1,200-year-old altar. It was pretty fascinating. But it's a wonderful experience. It's an interesting way to take a vacation. I certainly encourage people to consider it. It's become very popular. Like in today's world, there's actually roughly 400 to 500,000 people who are walking parts of the Camino every year.
Wow.
It's just it's on people's bucket list. It's on people's minds. There was a movie that was filmed and produced a few years back called The Way. Martin Sheen starred in it, and his son, Emilio Estevez, directed it. And when I think about it, I actually have an emotional reaction to it. It covers 4 people who are walking and how they meet each other along the way. It really gives you a sense of the power of the journey and the miracles that can happen. I won't tell you the background as to why the main character starts, because that's an important piece of the movie. But I encourage people to watch it. It's called The Way. Check it out.
Okay. All right. To me, as you describe it, even in the brief description you've made, I can see that this is a way for when people really are stressed and they find themselves just doing, that it's more than a retreat because you're still active, you're walking. I find it very difficult to meditate myself because I'm a person who moves all the time. And I'm in constant motion. And this would be something where I would be moving. And I guess you have to walk to whatever the next place is. So you can't escape. Tell me a story from it. Who is the most interesting character that you met along the way?
Let's see, a story. I can tell you some vignettes.
Sure.
My wife and I met a man once. This was on the Portuguese route. So the Portuguese route starts at Lisbon and goes straight north up to Santiago. It's a beautiful route. We walked 2 full days on boardwalks along the Atlantic Ocean. Imagine 30 miles of boardwalks. On that route, we met a young man, not a young man, but a middle-aged man who had been walking for literally 3 or 4 years as a result of his significant other passing away from cancer, and she had made him promise that he would walk the Camino. That's an interesting story, and you hear that from others. It's a tremendous exercise if you're going through grief. Another interesting individual we met once, and this was on the English route. So the English route, so if you lived in England at the time, back in the day, you got on a boat.
Right.
You came across the Bay of Biscay and stopped at Ferrol, got off, and then walked to Santiago to complete your pilgrimage. So we met this young man there. It was really hot. It had been hot for days. So he decided he was going to create a walking skirt. So he created a skirt. And he said it was cooler. So that was a fun tidbit. One thing that sticks out in my mind, this was fun. The Camino del Norte is the northern route, which starts in Irún and goes along the coast, the northernmost part of Spain, and goes into some of the famous beaches, cities, and what have you. Absolutely beautiful route. And I'm going to be walking it again in 3 weeks with a friend. About the 4th night I was out. And this particular time I walked by myself. So it's about 4 nights out. And I stayed at this albergue. So albergues are, think rooms with 20 people, bunk beds, 20 of your best friends. So it's like a fraternity, sorority house. Maybe not even as nice as that. But so it's communal living, shared restrooms and what have you. And that's one of the choices that you can make when you're making these journeys. I'm digressing a little bit here, but there are lots of other different levels of accommodations. Just a side note, when I did the first one, 5 weeks, my wife joined me about 250 miles out. And all of a sudden, I'm now staying in hotels instead of outerways. But anyway, so
I see there are options.
yeah, there are options for sure. So the Camino del Norte, about the fourth night out, staying on Albergate, and there's these three guys that are traveling together. And one is a Spaniard and two are Italian. None of them speak English. I don't speak either language, although I know a little bit of Spanish. And we had a real strong connection right from the beginning. And so we had a pilgrim's meal that night, and everybody's at the table, and we're just talking in different languages and whatever. But there was just a strong connection. Next day we get up, hug, and say goodbye, what have you. So that trip was probably another 5 weeks, I'm guessing, that I was walking. And the amount of times that we crossed paths during those 5 weeks was astounding. It was amazing. We would see each other and we would just say hello, give a hug, how you doing, as best you can, and then continue on. And I remember one morning I got up and I didn't want to walk a particular part, so I called a taxi. You can take taxis too. And I wanted to go to the outskirts of the city because I didn't want to walk through the industrial park and what have you. I didn't want to use that time for that. And I'm in the taxi. We're going to point B, and I pass him. A couple of days later, I pass him. And then about the last, say, week and a half, 2 weeks, I didn't see him. I get to Santiago, and when you walk into Santiago, you're walking into the old city, and it's a very strong emotional reaction. And you walk down to the right of the cathedral, and you go down the steps, and there's usually some street entertainment. All that's fun, and there's lots of activity. And you walk into the plaza. It's huge. And daggone if I don't run into my three best friends.
As you're talking about that, what is occurring to me is that this gives you an opportunity to actually feel life. I think sometimes we run so fast that we don't give ourselves time to allow the feelings to express themselves in us. And I think if for no other reason, if I could do it, and although I don't think I can, given a few things about my physical capabilities, I think that would be something that I would really value. And I think people who are in the say mid-career where you're really humping it, as they say, that's a moment when it's the time to slip away. Actually, as I'm saying that, I did exactly that. When I started this business, I had been at the World Bank as a division chief.
Oh.
And when I left, I literally got in my car and I drove to a retreat house. And I spent a weekend in a silent retreat because I wanted to begin my business with thoughtfulness. And it really worked because it allowed my whole self to really separate and then come home and begin.
Have you been able to keep that practice going for yourself?
No. That's very hard to do.
I know. But I know you work with resilience as a theme. And obviously that's important to you, and you've shown it and you demonstrate it and you teach others to do that. That's wonderful. You're teaching people how to go inside, right? And how to find that resilience. So I'm curious about that. Tell me more.
Okay. Fair question. I don't focus so much on the inside.
Okay.
What I focus on is the physicality of it. Okay. You make a decision and you prepare yourself for that decision, but you prepare yourself through practice. So there are all kinds of practices, and one of them is to ask questions.
Okay.
Because when you need to be resilient, it's almost as if the body's ready to have it be called forth, but you need to have options from which to choose. So you may say, okay, this is a bad situation and I'm deciding I'm going to move on. But let's see, I've got these 3 ways I can do it. And you have to decide which one. But you have to have some options. So you have to
Right.
have curiosity. So I tend to look at it from that aspect. And so to me, whatever your body does is also our minds and our bodies are connected. And it's a question of attention. I love the fact that as you describe what you do on the Camino, clearly you are allowing that connection to happen because you're walking all the time.
Yeah.
So that's the physical part. Yeah. Okay.
So I have a question though. So
Yes.
when you have options, you ask questions. What's the process then to make that final decision?
Oh,
Is there a certain list of questions?
no, no. Well, the real secret is to take the time to get to know who you are. And I usually do that through having them write stories from their own life. It's a beautiful way to discover who you are and why you are, because the events of our lives do that. They form us. And as you get to know who you are, your confidence level goes up. And it's almost at the point where you say, of course I can make this decision. And the last piece of it, and this is critical, you need social support. That's why I was so intrigued when you talked about your experience with the dinner theater. You had a family around you. So all of you were supporting each other. And resilience, that's what you want. You want people around you to give you support. That's why I think families are so important as we're growing up and even after we've grown up, to make sure you retain those connections. Because that's in a way the first line of defense, the first line of support when you have difficulties. And of course, there are many other ways in which you can generate connections with people to support you. Yeah. Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah.
I never answered it that way before.
I loved how you did that.
Thank you. I am curious now. I want to come back to the Camino because I want to really challenge you. You've already talked about some of the benefits that you attained.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to ask it another way. What was the greatest challenge when you go to the Camino?
Greatest challenge. I see, the greatest challenge. I think the greatest challenge for me is I've come to explain the Camino experience consisting of 2 phases. The first phase is learning to deal with the voice in the head.
Yeah.
So we all have that voice in our head that is constantly going around and around like a record player. And it basically oscillates between fear and negativity or what have you. It's like in the past and it's like in the future. It's never in the present moment. So I link that to the idea of a ping pong game. Over the net, past, present, or past, future. And all of us have that. And if you're lucky enough to have someone say to you, you're not the voice in your head, starting point, you can then start to realize that voice in your head that is many times controlling you or strongly suggesting what you should do or who you are, like you referenced, first you got to know who you are when you were talking about your work. If you're lucky enough to have someone say, the voice in your head is not you, then you can start trying to understand what that voice is or where it comes from. And then you get to a point where you realize it's not important. It doesn't really matter. So the challenge for me, and this was really stood out the first trip I took, so 500 miles. So the first part of the trip, I just retired, and so I have all that mental whatever going on, and so I'm dealing with that, and I'm trying to process what's going on. I'm trying to get through the voice in the head, trying to understand it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just really a nuisance. It's like a child throwing a tantrum. and you have to get to a point where you just ignore it. So after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I started to realize that, oh, this is what I've been doing to myself my entire life, and it's not necessary. So the challenge then was, okay, first it's a discovery that you have this process going on and that it's unnecessary. And then the challenge is, okay, what replaces that voice in the head? My wife and I call reaching our Camino mind.
Yes.
And what that is, okay, there is this thing called presence. There is this thing called grace and inner strength and resilience and love. And all of a sudden, my experience, experiment of one, senses are heightened. Things you didn't see before. You hear things you didn't hear before. You don't react as quick as usually do. You act. You make a decision like you're talking about. Okay. So your senses are heightened. You're in the moment. Your mind, and if you're lucky, and that particular trip, we were lucky, the voice in the head turns off. And now you've hit a different plateau in terms of just how you feel and what you're experiencing. So the challenge, I think, is, first of all, you show up at the Camino and you bring your baggage with you, and it's mostly in your mind. And one of the beauties of the Camino is, for me, is the physical part of it. I have a backpack. I put that backpack on, that's all I care about. I'm not responsible for going to the grocery store, washing the dishes, or anything else. I'm responsible for what's in the backpack. And all I'm doing is walking. All I'm doing is walking. And it's just breathtaking. So you show up, you got your backpack, and nowadays, of course, you don't have to carry your backpack. You can hire someone or hire the postal service there, couriers will transport the bag for you. So it's growing. It's a business, and it's giving the customer what they want.
Yeah.
But you show up and you realize you've got this baggage in your mind, and that the challenge is, how do I get past that? And if I do get past that, because most people in their entire life never do, and I, for one, was one. And once you get past that, then what? Because then you have a fear. If I don't have this thing talking to me all the time, who am I really?
Yeah.
Luckily, someone said to me, "You're not the voice in your head." So that was a gift. So you transition from that to the Camino mind, where
there's something that you said that I loved. You put your backpack on and you were in the Camino mind. I think sometimes we forget that when we do something like that we do it repeatedly. That's why I talk about practices in resilience. You just keep doing it, because the more you do it, the easier it gets. And your whole being learns what you're trying to do. So in your case, your whole body learned that when you put the backpack on, Camino mind, and it happened. I think we forget that we can do that sort of thing. My last question to you would be, if somebody can't afford to go to Europe and can't take 2 weeks for the trip, what can they do in their daily lives? And I'm going to begin this because I'm excited about what you were saying about you didn't have to worry about going to the grocery store. You didn't worry about cooking, washing dishes. One of the things I recommend to people when I work with them on resilience is most people have to-do lists.
Yeah.
And mine is huge. It really is. It's absurd. But I say to myself, Madelyn, what are the 3 things you must do today? And I put those at the top of the list. And let me tell you, it doesn't matter how many steps are beyond that. When I finish those first 3, it's like you said, I'm free.
Yeah.
I can choose to do more, but I don't have to. So I'll pass it back to you.
That's a great practice. I like hearing that. Okay, if you walk from St. Jean Pied de Port to Santiago, it takes roughly 33, 34 days. You don't have to walk 33 or 34 days. I think if you've got maybe 12 days, you can do what the Europeans do. So in Europe, we meet a lot of people who will, let's say they got a limited time vacation, say they got 10 days, just to pick a round number. They'll start at St. Jean Pied de Port, they'll walk 10 days, go home. Next year, they'll come back, start where they left off, walk 10 days. And lots of people do that. And then once you finish one route, you can do another route. If you have limited resources, that might be an idea to do. Or go out your front door and just walk. Don't make it complicated. You said something that was hitting the nail on the head. The body knows.
Yeah.
Go walk. And what happens, this is my experience. And what happens is, and I'm sure there's a lot of literature about this, when you're walking and touching the earth, even though you got shoes on and you're walking on concrete, it does something to your body.
It does.
And it breaks up stuff. It breaks up stuff in the body and it breaks up stuff in the mind. Yeah. And it helps you. And go walk where there's trees. Walk in nature. Hug a tree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back in the 60s, people hugged trees all the time. Now we paper out of them. But walk out of your house and just walk. Don't make it a big deal. You don't have to have special shoes. You don't have to have a backpack.
Yeah.
Just walk. Walk. All we're doing is walking.
Oh, goodness. David, I have so enjoyed this conversation. So much fun. I'm in my mind, I'm taking walks, I can tell you. And for those people who were inspired by this, there is, in fact, a planned Camino walk this September. And it's with David. And I will publish a link to it on my show notes on YouTube. But if you're brave, go to, now I have to read this because I have to read this correctly. Go to redmonkeywalkingtravel.com and search for Camino. And I'm going to say that again. One word, redmonkeywalkingtravel.com. So a couple of options. David Petrucci, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. This has been wonderful.
Good.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself.
Although it is hard to overstate Leonardo da Vinci's brilliance, recent scientific research reveals that you probably underestimate your own capabilities. That is how Michael Gelb begins his book, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. I'm going to talk about curiosità and dimostrazione. Okay. You probably have figured out what curiosità is about. It's an insatiable curiosity and curious approach to life and an unrelenting quest for continuous learning. When I did my research on my book, Riding the Current, I discovered individuals who were indeed insatiably curious. They constantly pushed the edges of what they knew. They would ask questions at any moment and at every opportunity. And when a speaker finished his or her speech, their hands were up immediately with the first question. When they read a book, they even read the footnotes. When they visited a store, they would seek out someone who could give them information they needed to make a purchase. And if they're studying a math problem, they want to know why it's important. How does it apply? And if they're not happy with how the dish turned out, they read 3 more recipes for the same dish just to see if there are small differences that would improve it. That's how they are. When I researched resilience, There it was again. Highly resilient individuals tend to be very curious. Dare I say, insatiably curious. It's part of the drive to move on. The book also has a wonderful feature. It offers self-assessment tools to see if you use the principle and exercises to improve your ability to do so. For example, one of the questions in the self-assessment is about keeping a journal or notebook to record insights and questions. Seems like somebody who's curious would want to remember those things. It turned out, lo and behold, I didn't even have to use the first exercise of keeping a journal because I do keep a journal. I keep one of all the invented recipes I've cooked, how they turned out. I've done it for 30 years. And I have another journal that sits next to my TV. And if I watch a movie, I write it down and I rank it and I say, I'll watch this again, or I will never watch this again. Another exercise is to make a list of 100 questions that are important to you. Now, that is a hard exercise, let me tell you. But it is incredibly fun to see what it is that you put on that list. Dimostrazione is a commitment to test knowledge through experience, persistence, and a willingness to learn from mistakes. We've been talking about stumbling in our lives, and how do you recover from that? Your mistakes are like that. I'm sure you've heard of after-action reviews that originated basically in the Army in an attempt to improve an exercise. Everyone involved in the exercise would talk together and share what they had observed and what they might do differently, what they could have done next time or will do next time. Just imagine if families sat together and talked about everyone's observations from, say, Thanksgiving dinner and what it might mean for the next year's celebration. You can use another, whatever is your favorite holiday, but you get the message. When I read through the self-assessment, the very first question felt very important. It asked if I am willing to acknowledge my mistakes. This is worthy of consideration again and again, with forcing yourself to identify when it happened and when it didn't. The true value of the principle to me is with practice. You can come to a place where you begin to see that you can trust our inner self. David talked about that. Imagine if you persisted in always asking yourself what you learned from a mistake until the lesson was there before you even asked the question. That just feels like your inner self is able to spot the mistake and conclude the lesson without even verbalizing it in the mind. Knowing this, you begin to simply trust yourself. What a gift! It means that when you are hit with the unexpected, you decide you will move on, and then your inner self already offers options from which to choose and how to move on. A gift indeed. The book includes 5 other principles, but these 2 are major to being resilient. How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, 7 Steps to Gain Genius Every Day by Michael Gelb.
Our next guest is a fascinating person. It is Madelyn Blair. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Donna. I'm so happy to be here.
Was thrilled when I found out that you're going to be here. We're going to be talking a little bit about your book, Unlocked, but first about the journey, your journey. And let's talk about light.
Light.
What happened?
In this case, it was lights out. You know, it doesn't matter how many children you have or what ages they are. When one of your children says they have a problem, it really hits you. And when I picked up the phone and my daughter said, "Mom, I have a brain tumor," the lights went out for me. It was a very black day. And I had to call on every piece of resource that I had to cope with just that. And then, of course, helping her with her recovery. And that's when I realized there were so many things that I not only had, but that my mother had taught me of how to really deal with life when it hands you something unpleasant. My book begins with that story, a little bit more than what I've just said here. And that combined with the fact that I've been a manager for many years, and I've watched staff and how they have recovered things and how I've helped them to recover. Because, you know, we all get impacted by things. We get fired, we trip on a sidewalk. It doesn't matter. We have to adjust to that. And that's what my book really goes after. And I really looked at the fact that I've helped people through that time. And I said, okay, Madelyn, I think you know how to tell people how to do this. So,
and one of the ways is for them to generate that source, to generate the light from within. You know, it's getting really unlocking, right? It's called Unlocked.
yes.
So some of the chapters in your book walk us through how one gets from here to here. For instance, you have making the choice, and you know, to create a decision. A clear vision pulls you toward it, and you're harnessing the great stuff that you already have. So some of these chapters are really profound. It's almost not like a workbook, but like a process. So why did you decide to do your book this way, and how have you seen it implemented?
Okay. Well, when you're developing your resilience, and that's really what I'm talking about is resilience, it's sort of like going after your black belt in martial arts.
Okay.
You know, you practice, and you get the black belt. And then you keep practicing and practicing and practicing the rest of your life because you keep getting better and better. Well, that's what the book is about. It introduces 5 practices that you can begin to incorporate in your life. And what I say is you just have to practice, and you don't stop. But they're not onerous, but they're things that build those capacities, those qualities, those traits that I saw in my research when I was looking at people who were really resilient. I mean, they have 3 characteristics.
Okay.
One is that they know who they are.
Know who you are.
That's the light within.
Okay.
They had in-depth knowledge in something, which meant that they had a foundation they could draw from. And the third, I have to laugh every time I think of it. They were insatiably curious.
I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. I know I have. And let me know what you would like to hear discussed here. Just send me an email, madelynblair.com, madelyn@madelynblair.com. To see what is coming up, get on my mailing list. Just go to my website, madelynblair.com, and sign up for it. Honest, I do not share my lists with anybody, and I only send out 1 email a week. If you're on YouTube, as always, click the like button and subscribe. This certainly helps me, but it helps other people who are trying to find this kind of information. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.